everyone, my name is Purnomo. I'm the pastor of Defence Anglican Church. Australian historian Colin Bale did a research a few years ago on the inscriptions that families chose on the headstones of Australian soldiers who died in the First World War. He wrote a book about it titled A Crowd of Witnesses, because one of the key things that those inscriptions do is they bear witness to what that generation of mourners thought about the deaths of their soldier relatives. Do you know what most of the families of the Australian fallen have chosen on the tombstones of the fallen loved ones? We may think it's the patriotic language of king and country or the word duty, all important themes during the war years. But Colin Bale found that most families chose the language of sacrifice instead. Of all the inscriptions about sacrifice, over 40% quoted the words of Jesus Christ in the Bible. In the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verse 13, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." That verse was widely used not just on tombstones, but on war memorials. It is used on the tomb of the unknown warrior in Westminster Abbey in London, and on the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne. It's not hard to understand why this verse was widely used on war memorials or tomb inscriptions. It is a reminder of the great weight that Jesus gives to the ideal of self-sacrificial service. According to John, the Gospel writer, the words of that verse were reportedly first spoken by Jesus Christ on the night before he was crucified, when he addressed his disciples and told them that there is no love greater than that of a person laying down his life for others. This is the supreme standard of love, according to Jesus Christ. In the context of the Gospel of John, this verse refers primarily to the love of Jesus, as shown in his death on the cross. There he laid down his life on behalf of his friends. He died for their freedom from God's judgment, from sin and death and the devil. That is the greatest love of all. It is that verse that helps me connect emotionally with the Anzac Day. As you can tell, I was not born in Australia, although I've lived in Australia for almost 2 decades and been an Australian citizen for over a decade. But when I first migrated to Australia, I didn't quite get the emotional attachment that Australians have for Anzac Day. Australia is not the only country that seeks to honor the previous generation who died for their freedom. I mean, I understood the sacrifice of the Anzacs in my head, but I didn't feel it in my heart, as it were. The Anzacs were part of a different history and time, a different race and country. So an emotional attachment to the Anzac Day didn't happen immediately for me. There were a few emotional barriers that I had to overcome. But what really helped me to develop an emotional attachment to the Anzac Day is that verse from John 15, the words of Jesus about his own personal sacrifice for us. In a sense, Jesus is also someone who was part of a different history and time, a different race and country. But over the last 2,000 years, people like me have come to the conclusion that Jesus is far more than that. Jesus laid down his life, not just for one nation, or one race, or one generation. He did it for all people, from all nations, all races, and all generations. And therefore, Jesus transcends all the barriers of history, race, nation, or time. Everyone who trusts in Jesus' sacrifice are his friends. Even more so, elsewhere in the Bible, we are taught that we are his brothers and sisters. Why does it matter? Well, because of who Jesus is. He's much more than just a human hero. You see, when a hero saves us, we admire them and love them for their sacrifice. But usually, we wouldn't give them our life, would we? And they wouldn't expect us to. Suppose you rescued me from a vicious ocean current or something life-threatening like that. I'd be able to say, I owe you my life. But I wouldn't give my life to you. You wouldn't expect me to either. Even if I did give my life to you, you would not know what to do with it. Yet Jesus tells his disciples that we are to obey him. Please consider the context of that famous verse from John 15. In the previous sentence, Jesus says, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you." And in the following sentence, Jesus goes on to say, "You are my friends if you do what I command." So Jesus expects his disciples to obey him and to love each other as he has loved us, even though we are from different history, race, nation, or time. John wrote in his first letter to the churches, chapter 3, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters." Jesus did not just lay down his life for us, he also took it up again. In John's Gospel, chapter 10, Jesus is quoted as saying, "I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay down and authority to take it up again." Wow! Jesus claims to have such power and authority to rule over life and death. Just think about that. And later, the eyewitnesses reported that Jesus did die for us. But after 3 days, he also raised from the dead. Who has such power and authority over life and death? Unless he's God himself. That is one of the reasons why so many people have responded to Jesus and have come to the conclusion that Jesus is not just fully human. And the Bible teaches that he is also the God who loves us and came into the world in order to sacrifice himself for us, so that we can be free from sin and death, and so that we can be together, be friends with God through him. That's why Jesus helps me to connect emotionally with the Anzac Day. Jesus transcends all the barriers of history, race, nation, or time in such a way that for me and for a large part of the Australian people of the Anzac generation, the Anzac sacrifice points us back to the sacrifice that our God and Savior made for us on the cross. I'm grateful to God for the Anzac sacrifice, for the freedom and democracy and many other blessings that I enjoy in Australia today. But like many others in Australia, the Anzac sacrifice reminds me to be grateful for the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, lest we forget. If you want to know more about Jesus Christ, please contact us through our church website in the description below the video.